Large variety includes specialties, combos, supreme salads, and kids' meals. Taco Bell, the best fast food north of the border. So walk in or drive up. Visit all of the Taco Bells in West Michigan. Open Sunday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Taco Bell's open Fridays and Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m.
This is News Talk 1090 WKBC, the Talk of Muskegon, authentically speaking with Marnie, and we're back. Talking about a great topic of perception and what shapes our perception, or how are we shaping our perception. Either way, it's quite an interesting topic and an interesting or a thought-provoking topic. So we were talking about education.
Yes.
Just how because I brought up the differences between the societies and perception on things, and so that led me to talk about that. Being an educator, I've just found it exciting and a little bit, like you said, daunting at the same time. Where do we start to change things, or can we, or, So at what point, what point in life do we start they're kids, so we're shaping their belief systems by telling them how to think and what's right and what's wrong. And as adults, at some point, we have the ability to, if we are aware enough, we have the ability to change our thoughts about things, change our own beliefs, or critically think about something. But in between, and this is what I think happens, because that's a really daunting process in itself, trying to break a lifetime of programming that is set up by either our society, our environment, our families.
Very
there's
reinforced.
A lot of external things that contribute to the shaping of our perception along the way. And so to work through that, once you get to my age, or, I think about the time that I really started to work on personal development and take a look at this, I was in my mid-30s. Mm-hmm. And so, early 30s, because it's been now probably 10 to 12 years that I started to really take a look at this stuff. And it's been a daunting process.
It is. It's so large, like you said, and taking it apart. And again, when we talk about this, and we're very passionate and excited about this, it's where I immediately go to, where can we make the most effect? Like you said, there's that societal issue, which is large, and then there is being able to, from what you do well, is training individuals to be able to recognize in themselves, and actually, the more I thought about it, it's like you're probably in effect teaching them to deprogram. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's deprogramming, along with the other things that come with that. Deprogramming, and then kind of looking again at what are things that are important to us, because I don't know if you can separate that out really easily if you haven't begun that process.
That's exactly true. That's exactly what it is. It's helping people take the current beliefs that they have, look at them, evaluate them. Not too much. I don't want people to spend too much time trying to evaluate things. That's where we start screwing up. And
too much thought.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But to look at that and say, is this true? How do we know this is absolutely a true belief? Where did it come from? And if you didn't have that belief, what is another belief? Actually, what I like to do is have people entertain the two opposite beliefs and say, which one is going to, in effect, help me create the life that I want?
Great exercise.
Is this one, so if I'm going to give an exercise, this is what I'm going to give to people, is if you have the belief that, let's just take a typical societal one here. I'm trying to throw one out at me if you could think of one.
I'm thinking of ADHD, because that's just where I'm coming from.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. The ADHD, we were talking about you brought up kids who are in special ed. Not that all ADHD students are in special ed, but, or that a special ed student, let's just say, we'll use that as an example, special ed student is not going to be able to do the same things that other people can do career-wise, or going to college or whatever. And that's wrong. Mm-hmm. Absolutely wrong. Yeah. And so that's just a belief that a lot of people have. So you take that belief and you entertain the other belief about that is their brilliance and what it is that that all things are possible. And people have to find a way to do it using the current skills or learn new skills, but using those other skills. So you take these two things and you entertain them. And now which one is going to create the life that the person wants? So if they've grown up taking special ed classes or whatever, and people have forever told them, well, you're never going to be able to do this, yes, entertain the opposite thought. And entertaining those thoughts, get rid of the one that's not going to serve. And then find a way to do it.
And going back to our previous conversations and other shows, what struck me when you said that was when you examine those two realities and what works, that allows you to kind of go back to that intuitive gut feeling. Again, if you're able to go, this is something that's kind of been imposed on me now that I look at it. A little bit fearful of changing, but if I can acknowledge that this role was sort of imposed on me, and I might have taken it on. I mean, that's taking the personal responsibility. I might have then behaved that way. It doesn't feel right. And so what does? And that becomes then, kind of your new perception and where your frame of reference. Something struck me. You mentioned the brilliance, of children that may be in a special education framework. And it reminds me a little bit of even some of the documentaries I've seen, but looking at, to the best that we can, how an individual or a child with Asperger's or high-functioning autism, just how their world is. And in some ways it is so beautiful because it's so sensory-oriented, which we definitely learn, I think, to contain as we get older a little bit. And it reminds me of going back to this book I've been reading now as a result of our conversations, is kind of training yourself to see things differently. We talked about writing, the negatives down and then the positives. You just talked about imposed perception versus maybe my reality that I want it to be. The author of this book actually went through this, which I don't think any of us would, I don't encourage that we go through this far, but he encouraged grabbing that journal, grabbing a small book or something, and even if you're not really artistic, take a look at drawing something. The classic, watercolor class where you do the fruit. Well, he actually drew a portrait of himself. He was asked to draw a sketch of himself, and what he did is he actually sketched out exactly the lines of his face. I mean, it was exactly, they had a mirror in front of him, and he sketched out the exact lines of his face. And then, at the end of the course, he was challenged to do a portrait only with color variations and color tone. So the difference was he was forced to look at things in terms of their color and where the color stopped versus the actual line of the face. It was actually looking at the face as a color and looking at the eyes as a color. And where did that color start and stop? A little bit like Impressionism, where you have the dots, but then all of a sudden when you step back, you've got this completely clear picture. And it was fascinating for him to see the difference as a non-artist between what he did and when you actually look at something and you just kind of draw out where the colors are and where they stop versus the figure of the cup that I'm looking at right now in the studio. And it's really just taking a moment, that creative spark, to kind of go, I'm going to try this. And I found it really fascinating. I did it with a leaf. I was sitting around on my porch going, thinking about being able to share in our discussion, and I was like, wow, that is a totally different way of looking at things. It reminds me of those visual challenges that they have where you see the profile of the two faces, and you might see that, or you see the vase.
Right.
It was exactly training yourself to be able to do both.
Well, yeah. And our brains are designed to be able to do that.
We just kind of shut down some of it sometimes, To
be able, well, again, if people who struggle to see that other picture, they can do it. Their brains are designed to be able to do that. And at one point probably could switch over between the two photos without, any effort. But people see based on their perception of their environment. And also perception comes from we perceive things based on what our knowledge is about things, what our knowledge base is, the learning that we've had the programming of belief systems that we've had shapes every bit of how we're perceiving our world. So when they look at these pictures, they might get stuck on the rabbit, but I don't even remember what the other part of that picture was. Boy, how's that for No, but I know what you're talking about. We played with those pictures. Actually, we hit the subject of perception in one of my psychology courses, and I just love those. I could just shift gears with that, so it's fun. But that's exactly what's shaping that. So if somebody's kind of slowed down to that shifting of things, I guess I'd ask what they're stuck on. Those belief systems that they have. You and I also talked about the other day how all of that's shaping the perception, and then it's shaping our beliefs, and it's shaping how we feel about life, and then our thoughts. And we know that our thoughts in themselves, to me, they're behaviors. It's a behavior that you're actively doing something. You're having a thought process, and then you're seeing something. You're perceiving your world, and then you're acting on your world. So now your behaviors are coming into play, and then as a result from that, acting on your world, you get a result from other people who are acting in accordance to that. So we talked about the full circle and how this comes out, and that process of attraction, the law of attraction, that people have come to learn about or hear about through the many different books, The Secret, and there's just the power of attention. But I think truly understanding, people have developed their own opinions about what this is, and I think a lot of people think of it, or at least some of them are starting to look at it a little bit differently. But the first thought about that was this mysticism thing, and it's just hoodoo voodoo sort of talk when they're talking about The Secret and the law of attraction, and not understanding the full dynamics of that, and how our thoughts and the energy that we send out there with our emotional energy, our thinking energy, our thoughts, and how we're impacting the rest of our environment, and what comes back to us as in return for that.
I think that with the law of attraction and the discussion on that, unfortunately, I think we've seen examples in the media. It's a bit of the sensationalism. It's taking it to I thought about winning the lottery all day and I won it. It's unfortunately we see these sensational examples of this. It does remind me of the situation, when you are, I think we talked about this even last week, if you're not feeling well, and suddenly you notice every single food commercial, it really is something that we're just not necessarily, some of us may not be really consciously aware of that, but because of where you're at, those are the thoughts that you're open to. It's a matter of being able to do that with maybe some of the bigger things in your life, and being able to see and believe in what maybe some of the options are. And I think that setting aside, being able to learn to identify some of those imposed perceptions, what's come from our environment and that we've accepted, because again, our world doesn't make us, we make our world. But I think it's very poignant because there's so much power if there's a general perception that's picked up by, society, and then which results in those labels. It's hard to buck that.
I think what's hard, the first thing that has to happen is just the awareness that is the case, or at least the awareness that something's got to give or something has to change. So you get to that level of, I'm tired of, I think I threw up a post and a picture, said it so perfectly. I just one day woke up, I was tired of feeling this way.
Right, I saw that.
So I changed. I decided, so that has to come first. That wake up of, something's got to give, I have to change something. And then you start to look at, what needs to change and how do you need to change it. And that's kind of the point that we're talking about is one day saying, okay, accepting the responsibility for it. Because when you and I, when we talk about, environment or external factors playing a role here, we're not saying that our belief systems that were handed to us growing up, or what we were taught and what we learned to believe, we're not saying that that's an excuse. We're not saying that we're not telling people it's okay to just say, well, that's what my parents always believed, and that's what the church taught me, and that's what, the government says, or whatever it is, or that's what I read in the paper. We're saying yes, those things shape our beliefs, but we're not saying to use them as an excuse now. What we're saying is to recognize that, and now let's try to formulate our own opinions, our own beliefs, and our own perception about things. Acknowledge that yes,